She thought it was just another routine chase on a frozen back road, snow falling hard, radio crackling, two armed thieves running out of options. But in the blink of a mistake, the hunter became the hunted. The criminals turned on her, stripped her of control, and vanished into the mountains with her patrol car and her fate sealed inside the storm. Miles away, a former Navy SEAL walked the forest trails with only silence and a German shepherd at his side, believing he had left chaos behind him forever. Then the dog stopped. Oil on snow. A broken rhythm in the wind. Something about the trail didn't belong to nature. As daylight bled into dusk, instinct replaced peace and the past. The SEAL tried to bury Rose with every step forward. This was no longer about criminals or badges. It was about a life running out of time, and the quiet question the storm asks us all when danger finds someone else. Will you walk away or follow the signs God places in your path? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, please subscribe for more stories of courage, faith, and unseen guidance. Your support is a huge motivation for us. Inspire us to create even better stories. Snow thickened over Coldwell, Montana, as late afternoon faded into a gray, breath-holding dusk, the mountains closing in while the cold pressed low against the town like a warning not yet spoken. Elena Crowell guided her patrol car along the narrow main road with deliberate restraint. Headlights dimmed just enough to avoid drawing attention. She was 26, slender but wiry, her movements shaped by long shifts rather than gym routines. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a practical low bun beneath her knit cap, wisps already damp with melting snow. Pale winter light reflected off skin that rarely saw the sun this time of year, giving her face a sharp, almost porcelain contrast to her dark, watchful eyes. Those eyes had earned her a quiet reputation in Coldwell. Elena noticed things others overlooked. She wasn't loud, wasn't reckless by nature, but she carried something deeper, a stubborn sense that order mattered even in places where the world felt forgotten. Raised by a father who'd worked 30 years as a highway patrolman before a drunk driver ended his career, and most of his optimism, Elena learned early that vigilance was not paranoia, it was survival. Tonight, that lesson pulsed behind her ribs as she followed two vehicles that did not belong in town after dark. The suspects had hit a closed hardware store less than an hour earlier, breaking in with speed and precision that suggested experience rather than desperation. No sirens, no backup yet. Coldwell had only 2 deputies on shift, and Elena trusted her own instincts more than a delayed response. She kept her distance, heart steady, mind rehearsing contingencies. Still beneath her composure lay an unease she couldn't name, a quiet sense that the air itself had shifted. Snow-absorbed sound swallowed familiar markers, turned the world deceptively calm. She reminded herself to breathe. She had handled worse. She had trained for this. The road curved sharply where town bled into forest, asphalt narrowing and ice glazing the surface in deceptive patterns. The suspects accelerated without hesitation. Elena followed, calculating speed terrain, the margin of safety shrinking with each second. Then it happened, fast, brutal, and unforgiving. The lead vehicle braked suddenly at the bend. Elena reacted, tires skidding as the steering wheel shuddered violently in her grip. Before she could correct, a dark shape surged from the trees. A man slammed against her driver's side door with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. The impact rang through her bones. Another figure yanked the door open, rough hands dragging her out before she could unholster her weapon. She fought instinct training rage, but ice betrayed her footing. Her knees hit snow cold, searing through fabric as if biting straight into muscle. One of the attackers struck her across the temple, not hard enough to knock her unconscious, but enough to blur the edges of the world. She tasted blood. She heard laughter, sharp, careless, almost amused. One of them was tall and broad face, hidden beneath a scarf, movements aggressive and impatient. The other was leaner, quicker eyes darting constantly, as if already anticipating pursuit. They worked with efficiency that terrified her more than brute force. Duct tape burned against her wrists as they bound her hands behind her back, then her ankles. She shouted once, the sound torn away by wind and trees. Then the taller one ripped the radio from her vest and smashed it under his boot. He leaned close enough for her to smell gasoline and sweat. "Should have stayed in town," he muttered, voice low, almost bored. Moments later they were gone, engine roaring as her own patrol car vanished down the forest road, red and blue lights swallowed by snowfall. Silence rushed in, thick and suffocating. Elena lay on her side, cheek pressed into snow already crusting with ice. The cold crept fast, numbing fingers first, then fear blooming as sensation faded. She forced herself to stay awake, counting breaths, recalling training manuals she'd memorized years ago. Panic would kill her faster than exposure. She rolled slightly, snow soaking into her jacket, every movement costing more strength than she could afford. Dusk bled into night. The forest loomed, black pines rising like sentinels, indifferent and ancient. She had grown up around these mountains, had loved them. As a child had trusted them. Now they felt vast and uncaring. Thoughts crept in uninvited. Her father's voice warning her about overconfidence. The quiet pride in his eyes when she'd pinned on her badge. The unspoken fear he carried every time she walked out the door. Regret twisted through her chest, not for choosing this life, but for underestimating how quickly control could vanish. Snow continued to fall, soft at first, then heavier, filling the grooves of tire tracks already fading. She realized with mounting dread that even if someone came, the forest would erase her as efficiently as it erased everything else. She tested the bindings again, teeth clenched against pain. Nothing gave. Her breath came out in short, white bursts. She began to shake violently now, muscles rebelling. She focused on staying conscious, on grounding herself in small details. The smell of pine, the distant creak of branches, the strange beauty of moonlight filtering through clouds. Somewhere between terror and resolve, she made herself a promise. If she survived, she would never again assume the line between order and chaos was thicker than snow. Far down the road, unseen by her, the stolen patrol car cut deeper into wilderness, its tracks already being claimed by the storm. The forest accepted everything without judgment. Tire marks spilled, fear, the echo of a woman's breath, fighting cold. And as night fully claimed Coldwell's outskirts, the snow continued to fall, sealing the first mark of a trail that had not yet been understood. Snow drifted sideways through the forest as evening tightened its grip on the mountains outside Coldwell, Montana, the wind rising in long, restless breaths that bent the pines and erased distance. Rowan Hale moved along the ranger trail with the quiet certainty of a man who had learned long ago how not to announce his presence. At 38, he carried the build of someone shaped by endurance rather than display, tall, broad, through the shoulders, lean where it mattered. His dark beard was thick, but kept short, more habit than vanity, framing a face cut by sharp lines and old restraint. A faint scar ran near his left eyebrow, pale against weathered skin, the kind that came from debris rather than blades. His gray eyes were steady, almost muted, as if they had learned to conserve reaction the way his body conserved movement. Rowan spoke little to people, not out of arrogance, but because words had once failed him in places where sound carried consequences. Years earlier, as a Navy SEAL, he had survived an explosion that collapsed a structure around his team. 2 men did not walk out with him. Since then, Rowan trusted terrain more than conversation, silence more than reassurance. When his service ended, he found the only place that still made sense, the forest. Winter patrol work suited him. The land did not lie, and it demanded attention in the same uncompromising way combat once had. Beside him walked Cairo, a German shepherd just past 4 years old, his black and tan coat thick and insulated against the cold. The dog moved with restrained power, head level, tail low, but steady paws, placing themselves with instinctive confidence even on ice-slick ground. Cairo's ears remained upright, constantly adjusting, catching sounds too subtle for human notice. His amber eyes reflected the forest with alert intelligence, not wildness. He had been bred for police service, trained young, tested hard. During advanced drills, Cairo had refused to disengage from a simulated threat, holding position beyond the command window. Some called it failure. Rowan had recognized it as a line the dog simply would not cross. Once loyalty locked in, it stayed. Rowan had taken Cairo in without hesitation. Neither of them did well with half measures. They were several miles from town, moving through protected land where the road thinned and the trees pressed closer. Snowfall softened the world, absorbing sound, until even Rowan's boots felt distant beneath him. He kept his flashlight off, trusting moonlight filtered through clouds. His breath came slow and controlled. The patrol was routine check access points, monitor wildlife markers, ensure no one foolish had wandered into restricted terrain. Yet the forest felt unsettled, not hostile, watchful. Rowan had learned to trust that sensation. It had kept him alive more than once. Cairo stopped. The halt was immediate, absolute. One moment the dog flowed forward, the next he stood rigid, ears sharply forward, muscles tightening beneath fur. A low vibration rose in his chest, not a growl meant to threaten, but one meant to signal. Rowan froze with him, weight shifting subtly back, every sense narrowing. He followed Cairo's gaze to the ranger road ahead and saw what the dog had already processed. Tire tracks crossed the snow at an unnatural angle, cutting hard off the roadway and into the trees. Fresh. The edges were still crisp snow, displaced rather than settled. Rowan crouched, gloved fingers hovering just above the groove. He didn't touch it yet. He studied it. Speed had been involved. Too much speed for ice. Whoever drove this had not slowed for the bend. His eyes tracked the direction of travel, then widened slightly as he noticed something else, parallel drag marks alongside the tire impressions, shallow but continuous. Not fallen branches, not animal. The spacing was wrong. The weight inconsistent. Human. Rowan straightened slowly, scanning the surrounding forest. Snow clung to branches weighed down by wind. No voices. No engines, just the creak of trees and the distant sigh of air moving through needles. His pulse remained even, but his mind sharpened, assembling possibilities. This road saw little traffic in winter. Rangers, locals who knew better. No reason for speed. No reason to leave the road. He exhaled through his nose. This was not an accident. Cairo shifted closer, pressing lightly against Rowan's leg, eyes flicking between the tracks and the darkness beyond. The dog's posture said more than sound could. There was distress here. Recent. Rowan felt the familiar internal shift, the one he had learned not to fight. Soldier instincts surfaced not as adrenaline but as clarity. Protocol would suggest calling it in, marking the location, waiting for daylight. Rowan weighed that option carefully. Snow was still falling. Wind was rising. By morning, these tracks would be gone, folded back into the landscape as if they had never existed. The forest was efficient that way. He keyed his radio briefly, listening to distant static and fragmented voices from town. The signal faded in and out. Incomplete information would help no one. Rowan made his decision. He clipped his flashlight to his vest beam, angled low, and gave Cairo a single hand signal. Track. The dog lowered his head immediately, nose close to the ground, inhaling deeply. His body shifted focus, narrowing until nothing existed beyond the trail. They moved off the road and into the trees, snow deepening with each step. Rowan adjusted his pace to Cairo's, letting the dog lead without pressure. The forest closed around them, sound disappearing entirely now, replaced by a heavy, insulated silence. Rowan noted every detail as they went. The way branches bent rather than snapped, the irregular impressions where boots had slipped, the uneven pattern that suggested struggle rather than steady movement. He did not allow his thoughts to leap ahead. He stayed where his body was, where evidence lived. This was not pursuit yet. It was reading. Several minutes in, Cairo paused again. Rowan stopped instantly, scanning ahead. The flashlight beam revealed a dark patch near the base of a tree. Rowan approached slowly, crouching low. A knit cap lay half buried in snow, navy blue, stiffening as ice formed along its edges. Nearby, a torn strip of reflective fabric glinted faintly, industrial stitching, the kind used on uniforms. Rowan's jaw tightened. He recognized it immediately, though he did not say it aloud. He did not touch either item. Disturbing a scene erased its voice. Instead, he stood letting the implications settle. Someone had been here. Recently. Someone wearing official gear. Cairo circled once, then returned to Rowan and sat abruptly, gaze fixed in the direction the trail continued. A trained indication. Human scent. Stress. Rowan felt a pressure build behind his sternum. Not panic, not fear, but urgency held tightly in check. He nodded once to the dog. Continue. The trail narrowed, becoming less obvious. Tire tracks faded, replaced by disturbed snow and broken patterns. Rowan noticed two distinct boot sizes, now stride lengths. Mismatched steps hurried. He also noticed long stretches where one set of prints vanished entirely, replaced by irregular drag marks. His fingers curled slowly into his palm. The forest grew darker as clouds thickened overhead, moonlight dimming to a dull sheen on white ground. Rowan's mind catalogued time, distance, exposure risk. Whoever had been dragged had not been able to move under their own power for long. Cold would be working quickly. He checked his watch, noting how much daylight had already been lost. He felt the weight of the choice he had made settle more firmly. Turning back now would mean leaving a truth unfinished. He did not turn back. Cairo's breathing changed as they moved deeper, becoming more focused, more rapid. The dog was locked in now, every instinct aligned with the trail. Rowan followed, boots finding purchase automatically, body remembering rhythms learned in darker places. He adjusted his grip on his flashlight thumb, resting near the switch, ready. The forest felt denser here, older. Snow fell thicker, catching in his beard, dampening sound even further. Rowan thought briefly of Coldwill, of its small streets and warm lights, of people unaware that just beyond their sight something had gone wrong. He felt no resentment. This was simply how the world worked. Danger rarely announced itself where people were looking. The trail continued forward, curving deeper into the protected zone. Rowan slowed, scanning the tree line. He could not yet see the person the trail belonged to, but he felt their presence in absence, the way snow had been displaced, the way branches bore silent witness. He considered the possibility of an ambush weighted against the evidence. Whoever had come through here had been in flight, not waiting. Still, caution was not optional. Rowan adjusted his route slightly, using terrain for cover, trusting Cairo to guide rather than rush. As full night settled, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Rowan stopped at the edge of a small rise, looking out over a shallow depression where the trail dipped again and vanished among trees. He stood there for several seconds, wind tugging at his jacket, snow collecting silently around his boots. He understood then that this patrol had ended the moment the tracks crossed the road. What lay ahead was not routine. It was responsibility. Rowan placed a steady hand on Cairo's shoulder, feeling the dog's muscles tense beneath his palm, ready. He did not speak. Words were unnecessary. Together they stepped forward, following the last visible mark into the dark, knowing that whatever waited ahead would not wait long. The flashlight beam cut a narrow tunnel through the falling snow, each flake flashing briefly before vanishing into darkness, as the forest seemed to fold inward around Rowan Hale and the quiet rhythm of his breath. Rowan moved slowly now, far more slowly than before, every instinct sharpened by the certainty that the trail no longer spoke of movement alone, but of survival slipping away minute by minute. His tall frame remained controlled, shoulders squared beneath his heavy ranger jacket, yet something deeper had shifted. This was no longer a question of investigation. It was a question of time. Cairo advanced several steps ahead, nose low, ears angled forward, the muscles along his back tense but fluid. The German shepherd's breathing had changed again, shorter, more urgent. Snow clung to his thick black and tan coat, frosting the edges of his fur, but his focus never wavered. The forest smelled different here, layered with human fear, cold metal, and the faint chemical tang of adhesive and fuel. Cairo slowed abruptly, then veered left, body stiffening. Rowan followed the movement instantly, light sweeping low across the ground until it caught on the pale outline of a human form half sunken into the snow. Elena Crowell lay on her side near the base of a fallen tree, wrists bound behind her back, ankles taped together, her dark hair frozen in damp strands against her cheek. Her uniform jacket was torn at the shoulder, the reflective striping dulled by ice. At 26, she looked younger in this moment, stripped of authority and motion, but her eyes, dark alert, even now tracked the flashlight without panic. Her breathing was shallow, and uneven lips tinged faintly blue, but she was conscious, holding herself together by will alone. The cold had worked its way into her bones. Her shivering was no longer voluntary. Rowan knelt immediately, movement's precise knife flashing once as he cut through the tape without letting the blade touch her skin. The instant the restraint loosened, Cairo stepped forward, positioning himself squarely between Elena and the forest teeth just visible beneath his lip, as a low, continuous growl rolled from his chest. It was not aggression. It was declaration. Nothing would approach without being challenged. Rowan shrugged out of his heavy outer coat and draped it around Elena's shoulders, pulling it tight to trap what little heat she had left. His hands were firm but careful as he checked her quickly, pulse, responsiveness, visible injuries, bruising at the temple, abrasions on her wrists, signs of early hypothermia. Bad, but not beyond recovery. "Stay with me," he said quietly, his voice even grounded. Elena swallowed hard, nodding once. Her teeth chattered violently now that her body was allowed to register pain. "They took the car," she managed, words clipped and breathless. "Two of them. Headed deeper. Didn't stop." There was no hysteria in her voice, only controlled urgency, the mark of someone trained to report under pressure. Rowan listened without interrupting, storing details, direction, timing, behavior. He did not ask questions she didn't have the strength to answer. The wind cut sharper as night settled fully, temperature dropping with brutal speed. Rowan scanned the terrain, already calculating distance and shelter. Less than half a mile downslope sat an abandoned ranger outpost, decommissioned years earlier but still standing. He made the decision immediately. Pursuit could wait minutes. Hypothermia could not. Rowan rose, bracing Elena carefully as he helped her to her feet. She swayed, legs weak beneath her, but she did not collapse. Pride Rowan recognized, or perhaps stubbornness. He supported her weight without comment, one arm steady at her back. Cairo remained close, eyes never leaving the dark between the trees. They moved slowly, deliberately, Rowan choosing the safest route rather than the shortest breaking trail where snow had drifted deep. The outpost emerged from the trees like a half-buried memory wood, weathered gray roof sagging but intact. Rowan forced the door with a quick shoulder check, sweeping the interior in seconds out of habit. Empty, cold, safe. He guided Elena inside, seated her on a bench away from drafts, and activated an old emergency heater mounted to the wall. It sputtered once, then caught, filling the small space with a faint metallic warmth. Rowan wrapped Elena tighter in his coat, and a spare thermal blanket, instructing her calmly, slow breaths. Keep moving, fingers. Stay awake. She obeyed without argument, eyes fixed on him with a mixture of gratitude and unfinished fear. When he knelt to meet her gaze, she seemed about to speak, then stopped, reading his intent. "You're going after them," she said quietly. It was not a question. Rowan nodded once. "I'll be back," he said. Not as reassurance, but as statement of intent. He secured the door, showed her the radio, explained how to call for help once signal improved. Then he turned away. Outside, the forest swallowed sound again. Cairo stood waiting, posture tight, ready. Rowan crouched, gripping the dog's collar briefly, forehead resting against the thick fur between Cairo's ears. It was a rare gesture reserved for moments when words had no function. "Track," Rowan murmured. Cairo's entire body aligned in response, tail stilling focus, narrowing to a single purpose. They moved. The trail beyond the outpost shifted in character. The chaos of struggle gave way to something more deliberate. Tire tracks reappeared, faintly, partially filled by snow, but still readable under angled light. Cairo ignored them at first, circling, nose lifting and lowering as he separated older scent from newer layers. Then he found it the sharper odor of fuel and heated metal lingering where the stolen patrol car had passed recently enough to leave a signature. Rowan followed, adjusting his stride, using the wind to stay down scent. The forest opened briefly into a rocky cut, moonlight reflecting off ice-slick stone. Ahead, the trail descended toward a narrow ravine. Rowan slowed, scanning for signs of a trap. The men who had done this were reckless, but not stupid. Yet nothing suggested preparation, only flight. They found the patrol car abandoned near the ravine's edge, nose angled awkwardly toward a stand of trees, engine long cooled but not forgotten. Snow had begun to blanket the hood, softening the hard lines of authority it once carried. Rowan circled the vehicle carefully, noting footprints leading away, two sets, uneven, hurried. The men had fled on foot, abandoning speed for concealment. Rowan did not touch the car. There was no need. Cairo had already moved past it, following the fresher trail beyond. Rowan cast one last glance back toward the outpost's direction, measuring distance, then stepped forward. He did not think of heroism. He thought of completion. The chase that followed unfolded without spectacle. No shouting, no gunfire, only terrain fatigue and the quiet inevitability of being tracked by something that did not tire. Cairo moved like a shadow, appearing where the men did not expect him, forcing them to turn, to stumble, to make mistakes. Rowan used the forest the way he always had: angles, elevation, patience. When it ended quickly. two men, breathless, panicked, found themselves pinned against rock and snow, the realization dawning too late that the wilderness they had tried to exploit had turned against them. Rowan disarmed and restrained them without excess force movements, efficient expression unreadable. The men said nothing worth hearing. As snow continued to fall, Rowan stood for a moment, breathing steady, the weight of the night settling around him. Cairo returned to his side, calm again, task complete. Rowan turned back toward the outpost, toward the woman who waited alive because she had endured long enough for help to arrive. The forest, having witnessed everything, resumed its silence. The abandoned patrol car sat at the edge of the ravine like a wounded animal, its metal skin ticking softly as heat bled into the cold steam barely visible where snow touched the hood. Rowan Hale did not approach it directly. He studied it from the cover of trees, body half turned into the wind, letting the forest speak first. The snow around the vehicle was disturbed but not chaotic footprints, circled briefly, then led away in two diverging arcs before rejoining. That told him more than panic would have. The men had argued here. They had made a decision. And they believed they still had time. Rowan's gray eyes narrowed slightly beneath his hood, his breath slow, measured. He felt the quiet certainty settle in his chest. This was where flight ended and desperation began. Cairo stood close, muscles tight beneath his thick winter coat ears, angled back to catch sound from behind while his nose worked the air ahead. The dog's tail remained still. This was no longer tracking alone. This was positioning. The ravine cut sharply through the forest, a narrow throat of rock and ice where wind accelerated and sound fractured unpredictably. Snow collected unevenly along its edges, deep in some pockets, scoured clean in others. Rowan recognized the place instantly for what it was: a natural funnel. Anyone moving through it would be forced into predictable paths, slowed by footing, exposed by noise. A perfect place to vanish if you knew how. A worse place to hide if you did not. He signaled Cairo with two fingers, a small circular motion. Wide sweep. The dog melted into the shadows without a sound, black and tan fur blending seamlessly with night and tree. Rowan adjusted his route, moving downslope boots, finding purchase where ice glazed rock. He did not rush. Rushing was what prey did. The men were somewhere ahead, out of sight, but not out of reach. Rowan imagined them clearly now. One tall, broad, driven more by force than foresight. The other leaner, restless eyes always searching for exits. He had seen their type before in places where law thinned and fear thickened. Men who believed speed could replace planning, who mistook aggression for control. They would be cold now. Tired, their confidence leaking away with every breath. Rowan used that. He let the wind carry his scent downhill away from them, while Cairo circled wide, silent. Snow continued to fall, softening edges, masking small sounds. The forest conspired with him willingly. A crack of ice echoed faintly ahead. Rowan froze, counting silently. 3 seconds. 4. A muttered curse followed, sharp and low. Human. Close. Rowan shifted position, angling toward a cluster of rocks that rose like broken teeth from the ravine floor. He moved behind them, lowering his profile, breathing shallow. His mind was empty now of everything but terrain and timing. This was the space he understood best, the narrow edge where patience mattered more than strength. He felt no anger toward the men ahead, only inevitability. Cairo reappeared behind them first. The dog emerged from shadow like a living cut of darkness, placing himself squarely at the men's rear before either realized they were no longer alone. His bark shattered the night explosive and full-bodied, echoing violently off rock walls and trees. It was not a warning bark. It was a command. The sound froze both men in place, fear snapping tight through their posture. One spun, slipping on ice arms, flailing as he tried to raise himself. The taller one reached instinctively for a weapon that was no longer there. Before either could recover, Rowan stepped into view from the opposite side, flashlight snapping on briefly, not to blind, but to announce certainty. His silhouette filled the narrow space, broad shoulders, squared movements, calm and unhurried. The contrast broke them. Panic surged where planning had failed. "Down," Rowan said once. His voice was low, steady, carrying easily through the ravine. No shouting, no threat, just instruction. The leaner man bolted instead, scrambling toward the ravine wall, boots slipping uselessly against ice-slick stone. Cairo moved instantly, cutting off the escape path without touching him. Body angled, teeth bared just enough. The man skidded to a halt, breath coming in ragged gasps, eyes wide. The taller one charged Rowan, a desperate, reckless choice born of fear rather than calculation. Rowan waited until the last possible moment, then stepped aside, using the man's momentum against him. A single strike to the balance point, a controlled sweep of the leg, and the man went down, hard air driven from his lungs in a sharp, helpless sound. Rowan was on him immediately, knee-pinning shoulder hands, securing wrists with practiced efficiency. No excess force, no wasted movement, just completion. The second man dropped to his knees without being touched, hands raised, shaking violently now that adrenaline had nowhere left to go. His face was gaunt beneath stubble eyes rimmed red from cold and exhaustion. He looked older in this moment, stripped of bravado, reduced to a frightened human body in a place that did not care whether he survived. Rowan restrained him quickly, methodically, then stepped back, scanning the ravine one last time. Silence returned, broken only by wind and the soft hiss of falling snow. Cairo stood alert but calm now, task finished, tail low, ears forward. Rowan rested a hand briefly on the dog's shoulder, a grounding touch, not praise. They both knew what had been done. As snow continued to fall, it began already to soften footprints, to blur the sharp edges of violence into something quieter, less distinct. The forest reclaimed the space without comment. Rowan looked down at the two men, then toward the dark path that led back to the outpost. His thoughts were not of justice or consequence, but of the woman waiting in the cold, of how close the night had come to taking something it had no right to claim. The trap had worked not because it was clever, but because it was patient, because it respected the land instead of trying to outrun it. Rowan signaled Cairo once more, and together they began the slow return, leaving the ravine to its snow and silence. Morning arrived without ceremony. The snow stopped falling some time before dawn, leaving the forest hushed beneath a pale, uncertain light that revealed rather than celebrated what the night had done. Rowan Hale stood at the edge of the ranger outpost as first light filtered through the trees, his breath slow, controlled, fogging faintly in the cold air. The night had passed through him without leaving chaos behind, only a familiar weight, the quiet aftermath that always followed when danger ended not with noise but with restraint. His tall frame looked unchanged in the soft gray of morning, broad shoulders set beneath his winter jacket beard, dark against skin roughened by wind and cold. His eyes, steady and gray, scanned the forest one last time, not searching for threats now, but confirming their absence. The land had settled. Snow lay smooth again, disguising the violence that had briefly disturbed it. Rowan had learned long ago that survival rarely announced itself with triumph. It simply allowed morning to arrive. Inside the outpost, Elena Crowell sat wrapped in layered blankets, a mug of lukewarm coffee cradled between her hands. The color had returned to her face, though exhaustion still pulled faint shadows beneath her dark eyes. Her dark brown hair had come loose from its bun during the night, falling in damp strands around her cheeks, framing a face that looked older now, not hardened but clarified. At 26, she had always carried herself with restraint, her slender build and quiet demeanor often mistaken for inexperience by those who didn't look closely. This morning she looked different. Still slender, still pale from cold, but steadier somehow, as if something inside her had aligned. She watched Rowan through the open doorway, observing him the way she always did, carefully, without assumptions. She understood now what kind of man he was. Not the sort who chased recognition, but the sort who stayed alert long after others relaxed. That awareness had saved her life. Cairo lay near the threshold, head resting on his paws, amber eyes half closed but attentive. Snow clung lightly to the edges of his thick black and tan coat, catching the new light. He was calm now, muscles relaxed, the sharp edge of focus replaced by a quiet readiness that never truly left him. At just over 4 years old, Cairo was in the prime of his strength, but what defined him was not power, it was decision. When to move, when to wait, when to stand between danger and someone who could not. Elena found herself watching him with something close to reverence. The dog had not known her name, her badge, or her purpose. He had only known that she was vulnerable, and that had been enough. The distant sound of engines reached them as the sun lifted higher, cutting thin bands of light through the trees. Rowan turned toward the sound, posture unchanged. He had already made contact once the signal returned his report, concise, factual. No embellishment, no commentary. The response had been immediate. Coldwell did not have many resources, but it had enough to recognize when something mattered. A sheriff's SUV appeared first, followed by an ambulance, tires crunching slowly over frozen ground. Rowan stepped aside as they arrived, allowing the professionals to take over without instruction. He answered questions briefly, directing them toward the ravine where the suspects had been secured. He did not follow them back there. His part in that chapter was finished. Elena stood when the paramedic approached, despite protest. She wanted to walk out on her own. The paramedic, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes, studied her briefly, then nodded. He had seen that look before. People who had been close to losing something did not like to be carried away from it. He wrapped a thermal blanket more tightly around her shoulders and guided her carefully toward the vehicle. As she passed Rowan, she stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary, inadequate. Then she extended her hand. Rowan took it without hesitation, his grip firm, steady. "You didn't give up," she said quietly. "Not gratitude, recognition." Rowan nodded once. "Neither did you. That was all." Cairo rose and stepped closer, brushing against Elena's leg lightly. She crouched, despite stiffness, resting a hand briefly against his chest, feeling the steady warmth beneath fur. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure who she was speaking to. The dog's tail moved once, slow and controlled. The ride back to Coldwell passed in silence, broken only by radio chatter and the hum of tires against frozen road. Elena watched the forest recede through the window, seeing it differently now, not as background, but as something alive, capable of erasing and preserving with equal indifference. She thought of how easily she had assumed control that night, how quickly it had been taken from her. Training had kept her alive. Awareness had kept her conscious. But it had been something else that had bridged the gap between danger and survival. The presence of someone who did not look away. The loyalty of an animal that did not calculate risk. She knew this would stay with her long after bruises faded. Back in town, Coldwell stirred awake beneath a thin winter sun. The streets looked unchanged. Storefronts, quiet snow piled neatly along curbs. Yet something had shifted imperceptibly. Elena stepped out of the ambulance, under her own power, greeted by familiar faces, questions already forming. She answered what she could, deferring the rest. She did not speak of fear. She spoke of facts, of choices, of how quickly order could vanish if one stopped paying attention. As she moved toward the station, she glanced once more down the road leading back toward the forest. Rowan and Cairo were no longer there. They had not waited for acknowledgement. That, she realized, was part of the lesson. Rowan stood alone again at the forest's edge once the vehicles disappeared, the quiet returning as if nothing had passed through. He watched the light spread across the snow, revealing the subtle textures of ground reclaimed. He felt no need to linger. The forest had accepted what had happened and moved on. So would he. He turned back toward the ranger trail, Cairo falling into step beside him without command. They walked on, resuming patrol as if the night had been no more than weather passing through. Rowan knew better, of course. Nights like that never truly passed. They layered themselves quietly into memory-shaping future decisions in ways that rarely announced themselves. As they moved deeper into the trees, the world narrowed again to breath-footing awareness. Rowan thought briefly of the men now in custody, of how quickly certainty had failed them. He felt no satisfaction, no anger. Only a distant sadness at how often people mistook speed for escape noise for power. The forest had corrected that misunderstanding without drama. Cairo lifted his head ears, angling toward a distant sound, a bird perhaps, or wind shifting through branches. Rowan followed the movement with his eyes scanning instinctively. Then he relaxed just enough. The danger had passed. The morning had arrived. By midday, the snow would begin to melt at the edges, softening what remained of the night. By evening, Coldwill would return to its quiet rhythms. The story would be told briefly, then folded into town memory like so many others. But for those who had been there, for a young officer who learned the cost of underestimating darkness, for a man who never stopped observing, and for a dog whose loyalty did not waver, the lesson would endure. There was no applause in that understanding, no ceremony, only the knowledge that sometimes survival was not about strength or speed, but about standing watch long enough for light to return. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive as a man who keeps watching when others turn away. Sometimes they arrive as a loyal dog who stands guard without knowing why. And sometimes they arrive simply as the strength to survive one more cold night. In moments like these, it is easy to believe that God works quietly, not by removing danger from the world, but by placing the right souls in the right place at the right time. A steady heart, a watchful presence, a loyal companion who refuses to abandon what is right. In our daily lives, we may never face a frozen forest or a night like this, but we all face moments where hope feels thin, where silence feels heavy, where we wonder if anyone sees us. This story reminds us that we are never truly unseen, that even when the world feels cold, someone may be walking toward us, guided by faith, duty, or love we cannot yet see. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story meant to you. And if you believe in quiet courage and loyalty, and in the small miracles that still exist in this world, please subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and protect you. May He guide your steps through every storm. And may you never forget, sometimes the greatest miracles happen in silence.